Like many of you, I have a lot of challenges when it comes to having a successful garden. In this video, I'm giving an overview of the top 5 that I deal with and my solutions. Those 5 challenges are temperature extremes, shade, slopes and hillsides, pests and wildlife, and watering. Look for separate videos that go into those challenges and solutions in greater detail. Challenge number 1, temperature extremes. I live in New England Zone 6B, and with that comes really cold winters, very hot summers, and oftentimes spring and autumn are pretty short. And so part of my solution in combating these kind of wild swings and short growing windows is building a greenhouse. And specifically building a greenhouse with a GAHT. No, not that type of GAHT. A ground air heat transfer system. The real basic description of what that is hundreds of feet of pipe are wound underneath the greenhouse. Hot air from the greenhouse is forced through those down into the ground, and in turn that forces the cool air that's in the ground back into the greenhouse. Now I've had quite a few days recently that were in the 90s, which is 32 degrees Celsius. And to my delight, the temperature inside and outside was almost always the same. We would have a 92 degree day and I would have a 92.5 degree temperature on the inside of the greenhouse. So that's pretty exciting that the ground air heat transfer system is working. I've had greenhouses in the past that were just kind of traditional greenhouses, and I always knew that if it was 80 or 90 degrees outside, it was going to be 100, 120 inside the greenhouse. And so then it would become just like an oven, and it was really challenging to cool it down. This greenhouse does have features that try to mitigate the effects of a hot day, and I go into those details in other videos. But really, this greenhouse shines when it's cold, and the ability for it to hold on to heat when it matters. So I'll keep you posted on that front. But my solution for temperature extremes, my first solution is a greenhouse. So challenge number 2 is shade. Now my property is a 1-acre property it's nice because it's located in between 2 heavily wooded pieces of property. The challenge is I have basically removed all the trees that I can that cause shade on my garden. The remaining trees are along property lines that I don't have access to. They're 80 feet tall, they cast really long shadows, and so it reduces my growing season quite a bit because it's kind of like growing at the bottom of a well.
I don't know, I can't see nothing but leaves.
Jessica?
And so there's shade in the morning and there's shade in the afternoon. And so maybe like right at the focal point, the center of the well, I'll get maybe 8 or 9 hours of full sun. But move a very short distance away from that center point and the amount of sun dramatically drops. I mean, it's like maybe 4 or 6 hours of full sun a day.
Mommy's here! It's gonna be okay!
And so part of my solution was the greenhouse, to make it possible for me to extend the growing season, start seedlings earlier so that I have much bigger plants that I'm putting in the ground in the spring, as well as being able to grow plants much longer into the fall and hopefully into the winter. We'll see if it turns out being a full 4-season greenhouse. The other thing that I try to think about is plants that will produce fruitage and vegetables in partial shade. And there are quite a few plants that will do that. Along the edge of the forest, I have planted hazelnut trees, I've planted pawpaw trees, and I also try to think in terms of plants that will do well, like leafy green vegetables, lettuces, and really most brassicas. As you can see, the focal point of that well, where I've got trees surrounding me, that center point where I get the most sun, well, it happens to be on the side of a hill. And so my challenge is, how do I set up growing spots on the side of a hill? And there's no easy answer to the solution other than hard work. You have to make flat spots. You have to dig them out. to make room for your gardens. And a lot of times you have to make pretty big spots, and it's hard. I do have an attachment for my trimmer that's a tiller, which makes it very lightweight. And so it makes it easier to kind of scale up the side of a mountain and start carving a spot. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a shovel, a pick, and a pry bar, at least in this part of New England. Lots and lots of rocks, which also means lots and lots of raised beds as well, because the ground is really rocky. But like I said, there's no easy way around this particular problem other than you have to do the grunt work of making flat spots to establish your gardens. Now, along with that, that means you need a way to get to them. And so, most of those spots I've had to build stairs, which isn't a huge deal. A couple years ago, I built a 100-step staircase that went from the bottom of my property to the top of my property so that I had an easier way of getting up there. And over the course of building those stairs, I kind of worked out all of the issues related to building such a long staircase and building stairs on the side of a hillside in general. And so when it came to building the stairs around these gardens, I think I had most of the kinks worked out. And you can check out my videos on how I go about doing that. Come on, Bubba's. Come on. Come on, goofball. Come on. Come on. Challenge number 4, wildlife and pests. One of the best aspects of this particular piece of property is that there's so much wildlife. I mean, a ridiculous amount of wildlife. And so it's fantastic. It's also one of the biggest problems on this property because all of those different animals and pests, well, they love to eat my garden. They would love to take a crack at the chickens and the eggs, or both of them. And so part of the solution in dealing with wildlife is I have to protect just about everything I plant. I have made the mistake too many times over the years of thinking, maybe I can sneak this plant by. Maybe it's okay if I plant it here, nobody's gonna see it, nobody's gonna eat it. And without fail, they always did, and it was a very frustrating exercise. And so now I kind of go into the situation when I'm gonna put a new planter in or a new plant, I have to assume that they're going to eat it, and I have to take steps to prevent them from doing it. Now, some of the solution is active management. So that means hunting the deer, the turkey, the squirrels, and trapping. You know, the mice, the rats. The chipmunks, the raccoons, with a mind or with a recognition that I'm part of this ecosystem. And so I'm never trying to completely wipe them all out. I'm just trying to reduce the numbers so that my garden has a fighting chance.
Oh, you got me, pal. Oh, you got me. Oh, this looks like the end.
You know, those animals have babies to feed. The foxes and the bobcats and the bears and, well, all of them, skunks. I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of wildlife that I see on a regular basis here. And so I don't want to prevent that from happening. And I don't want them getting sick because they can't find food. And so I try to balance the active management with kind of a mentality of, all right, you won that round, I'm going to win this round. And so I don't begrudge an animal that's trying to get into my garden because that's literally their job description, is to do that. And so part of that is just kind of becoming one with the problem. And whenever you see an animal made it through the perimeter, fixing the problem that allowed them and trying to beat them on the next time around. The 5th challenge that I'll mention was, you know, everything is on the side of a hillside, or most of my gardens are on the side of a hill. It was hard for me to get enough pressure with my garden hose up the hill to thereby activate the drip emitters. There just wasn't enough pressure. The line would fill up with water and the drippers wouldn't drip. And so I had to come up with a solution where I had enough volume and enough pressure that I could consistently water all of the different gardens on my property. And so what I came up with was a gravity-fed system using a 275-gallon tote, which is about 1,200 liters. And I put that about halfway up the hill, and I do a gravity-fed irrigation system all the way down. And so I'm able to water about 90%, maybe 95% of my different beds with this system. Hundreds of feet of irrigation tube, half-inch irrigation tube. And in spots, I had to run it through electrical conduit so that if it was in an area where the irrigation tube was exposed, if I hit it with a trimmer or if it was going to get a kink or anything along those lines, I would put it in electrical conduit. And I'm really happy with it. It works very well. I also have a 50-gallon barrel inside the greenhouse that's fed from that 275-gallon tote. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how did I get the 275-gallon tote filled? Well, it turns out there is enough hose pressure to fill the tank to make up the difference that was watered in the previous day. It kind of trickles in there. And so I have a timer that turns the hose on. It fills the tank up every night. And so far, so good. I do have to have a no pressure timer on the actual tank itself and on the tank in the greenhouse, because normal garden timers work by using hose pressure to open the valve. And gravity-fed systems don't have enough pressure to open that garden timer. So you have to get a no pressure garden timer. Okay, so there's the overview. And I hope that was helpful. I know there was probably some questions that came up or comments. I would love to know what you're thinking. So please leave your comments below. And that's it. I look forward to seeing you next time. And if you liked this video, you might like these videos. There should be like boxes that appear that show you other videos. Maybe you'll like them.